Good afternoon. Welcome back to day 3 of FinTech Week Tel Aviv virtual. It gives me great pleasure to invite 2 esteemed guests who I know personally. Ali, I hung out with in Dubai in December, he is a master in the blockchain space, but I will let him tell you about that. Csilla is from Blockchain Technology Partners, one of our dear friends and sponsors and partners, and we enjoy a very fruitful relationship with both Csilla and Duncan, the CEO. But without further ado, I'm going to leave the floor and let Csilla introduce herself and Ali as well. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a very exciting session about the DLT session, and I believe you've got some very exciting news as well to share with us. So thank you, guys. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much, Johnny, and good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, wherever you are. I'm personally connecting from Barcelona, Spain. My name is Csilla Zsigri, and I am the VP of Marketing and Strategy at Blockchain Technology Partners. And in today's Fireside chat, we will be exploring the distributed ledger technology landscape from an investor's perspective. And for that, I have my special guest, Ali Madhavji, managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund. But Ali, would you mind saying a few words about yourself?
Sure, I'm happy to, and wonderful to be here. So as mentioned, my name is Ali Madhavji, managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund. We invested in venture build top tier early stage startups. We're also LPs on Loyal VC and Draper Goren Home. Senior blockchain fellow at INSEAD, and work with the United Nations around how emerging technologies can help alleviate poverty. In addition to that, serve on the board of directors of 2 public companies. One's an NASDAQ company called Mechanical Technologies. The other is a Toronto Stock Exchange venture company called CryptoStar, both focused on crypto and Bitcoin mining.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ali. Before bombarding you with all sorts of questions, I'd like to spend a few minutes introducing a freshly launched open source DLT landscape product. And we will basically just use it as the springboard for our conversation. And before showing you the actual product, I'd like to share with you a little bit of the backstory. The creation of this landscape was initially inspired by the growing complexity of an evolving enterprise blockchain market, that in particular the increasing number of projects and companies and all sorts of organizations innovating in areas that were outside of the core distributed ledger layer. And this has considerably transformed the vendor landscape in the last few years. And I used to be a technology industry analyst, and in that prior life, I often found that people were using the same sort of terms for very different things, and they were comparing apples and oranges, which ultimately creates a lot of confusion in the market, and especially in a complex world that is DLT, and this brings about undesired consequences. So we thought that creating a market landscape that sort of uses a technology foundation would be really useful for providing a better understanding of what are the key technology pieces, how they fit together, who's offering what, whether that's an open source tool or a proprietary offering. But most importantly, it was designed to serve as a common language for the DLT community and be used as a strategic tool. For example, so you can better position yourself, you can explore partnership opportunities throughout the landscape, and tweaking go-to-market strategies. So now I'm going to show you the actual product. I need to share my screen share, just the application, not the whole. Okay. And here you go. So now it's pulling up. So yeah, so this is it. So the application itself, it was the landscape is modeled after the Cloud Native Computing Foundation's landscape and uses the same open source code. If if we go, because we have a lot of layers. So you will see that the layering of the landscape is essentially starts with here you go, down with the infrastructure at the bottom, and then goes on to, in blue, the core distributed ledgers, technology intersections, then goes up to interoperability, the smart contract and token layer, then the business tooling and integrations, and then application at the top. And then you see on the two sides, you will see the platforms, those companies that, take care of the management and operations part of things, and services on the right-hand side with, all the IT services firms that are active in blockchain. So and we can play with this, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So you will see that, sorry, I didn't mention that, all these layers, we have split them into, different categories, because we thought that it was important to make it like sufficiently fine-grained, but also sort of digestible. We didn't want to make it too complex. And then you will see all sorts of logos, and these are the sort of company cards. If you, for instance, let's click on one. Digital asset will be very happy to see this. So as you click on a card, then you will see here demo, because this is the smart contract layer of the landscape. This is Digital Asset is the creator of the smart contract language demo. So you will see all this information. This information is not obviously something that we made up. We are pulling this information from Crunchbase. So this is important, because I recommend, if you want to feature in this landscape, I recommend you to keep your Crunchbase profile up to date. And obviously, if you don't have one, create one, because otherwise we won't be able to include you. So there are these cards. You click on them, you find some data, and if you see, we use the logos of the different companies, but you will also see that there are DLT landscape logos. What that means is that there's a requirement. For instance, we can go here. There's a specific requirement from the code of the landscape that we can only use SVG format logos, and it can be converted. It has to be genuine. So, if we need that from you. So we need to send that. And we did all the research and the collection of logos, but in some cases we didn't succeed. So that's the reason why you will find those. So yeah. So in any case, I mean, the good thing about this, that this is a living market landscape, right? So this was, let's say, is created by the DLT community for the DLT community. So, it's, you can submit a pull request, and then, we can basically update anything. You can suggest changes. We, at BTP, I mean, we created it. We are going to continue to host it and curate it, but it's it's something that I hope that the community together will make grow and evolve. It's an independent product independent from the company. So I think this is it, and I'm going to remove. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. So Ali, from an investor's point of view, what do you think about the landscape? Is this something useful? Do you see this useful at the fund? Is something that you would consider or benefit from it?
No, absolutely. I think when you look at how to break down companies, across these different layers, I do think it's important, right? Because you can actually then start to see, where your company's focusing, how are they doing sort of in that category. You could just take, that breakdown and also look at, which geographies are those, startups, say, participating in, and, how are they doing in those markets? How are they doing relative to those players? So I do think it can be valuable there. I think in a lot of cases, it's even more valuable as a way to just explain externally as well to, say, someone less familiar or someone that's looking at a pure sort of broad landscape to say, hey, this is sort of how it breaks down and the different layers. Given that we've been very deep in this for many years, we obviously sort of almost innately have a similar sort of way, but I think your way is much more structured and so I think quite helpful overall.
Excellent. And as you mentioned, the breakdown of the landscape is, in your experience and looking at the portfolio of the companies that you invest in and also the things that you see out there, what are those, investment areas and targets that you where you see sort of concentration of, ideas and projects, like, crypto versus other financial use cases or finance focused use cases versus, other types of things such as, asset traceability or even some of the categories that you can see of the landscape. So where do you see those areas that are really, really hot right now?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, right? And so we're industry and geography agnostic, and what that means is, we have incredible companies leveraging blockchain and emerging technologies across, fintech, ed tech, media entertainment, supply chain and traceability, decentralized finance, NFTs, etc. And sometimes what's hot today as well is not what's hot tomorrow. And so we're, of course, trying to find those companies doing incredible things as well before they're hot, right? And I think a good example of that is last year at a conference, Adam Draper and I were on together, and we were asked, what's going to be the hot thing of 2021, and we both called NFTs when no one was talking about NFTs. Yeah. And I think that's a good example of trying to identify what some of those companies that are just driving real change are in advance. And this means that we've got incredible companies also driving change in different regions of the world, right? And this also means that what's hot in North America might actually be different from what's actually gaining traction somewhere else. And so given as well how global this industry is, I think this makes a lot more sense versus when you compare it to, say a fund that's geographically and industry focused.
And now that you're mentioning the regional differences, can you just provide some examples of, what are those sort of areas that are, let's say hot right now in North America versus, in other regions, APAC or Europe?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So for us, just for quick context, about 35% of our startups are North America, about 30% are from Asia, and then the remainder is spread out across Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Australia. And so when you take that into consideration and you look at sort of what's hot, some of that is not just what's hot in blockchain. Some of that can be externally. So an example is many people are aware of, the amount of capital, say, pouring into Latin America around, a number of sectors, but one of them sort of leading the way is ag tech, right? Or agricultural sort of innovation. And so, in Latin America, we have a company that's part of driving a lot of this, which is a company called Agrio, focused on sort of an agri-fintech play of leveraging, data science as well as sort of satellite imagery, geospatial mapping, measuring soil moisture to predict agricultural crop yields in advance and work with financial institutions to decrease the risk of their lending portfolio. And in many emerging markets, you've got over 50% of GDP being driven by the agricultural sector. Yeah. So this is hands down the most important sector for livelihood in most emerging markets. Yeah. And so, you look at that as an example. You can look, elsewhere. You're seeing NFTs, for example, hot right now across blockchain globally. but you're seeing that, of course, coming out a bit more, I think, from certain countries, especially sort of a bit more, I would say, on the West right now. So that would be another example. I mean, decentralized finance in reality is one where I could see a pretty clear sort of divergence in the future, right? So right now, still quite hot globally, but when you take it into context, I mean, you can get really great yields, from borrowing, lending, and savings products, but in reality, because gas fees are high, this still really only helps, individuals that have a lot more capital right now. But over time, the goal is to actually help solve some of the challenges around unbanked populations and underbanked populations. And so you can see a clear divergence in the future where once some of those challenges are fixed around scalability and fee structures, which is, in large part of that scalability problem, you'll see that in emerging markets, this will be a tool that gets widely used to help leapfrog the traditional banking system. And so, as you start to break it down, you see examples of that really, and they come to the surface.
Yeah, and actually, and it's great. The example you started with the agri-tech application for blockchain. I mean, just thinking about, I don't see, or blockchain itself is hardly a standalone thing that you would use just for the sake because it's blockchain. It's always combined with something, right? And actually in the landscape, I dedicated a whole layer for the technology intersections. So how important is that? And what are those, promising key combos that you see being applied, like, thinking obviously AI, IoT, and things like that?
Yeah, no, this is I think a very important point, and I think it's still not understood necessarily by most people that look at this technology, right? And so we look at the convergence of technologies of where you start to see real exponential growth, right? And that means, when you pair it with AI, because you've got incredible data that's, starting to be leveraged by multiple parties, and that's starting to get combined in a more trustable format where you can leverage AI and generate, say, insights off of it. Or, if you're talking about supply chain, I think IoT and machine-to-machine data is going to be, much more reliable and much more accurate, much more timely, as a source, that's going to leverage and be part of that blockchain. And so, as you start to see that, this is the way that, we're really seeing things move forward. And so I think that based on that question, I would say it depends, right? It depends on what sector you're in. I mean, I think AI, IoT, they serve different purposes. And so it depends on, what you're trying to solve for and what creates the most value as part of that. And some of this, of course, is going to take time, right? Not everyone sort of has IoT devices set up to bring data in real time, bring all the right piece of data in. So some of this is going to take time for companies to roll out. It's going to take time for companies to continue to roll out solutions around blockchain as well. But as you start to think about putting these together, we think that it unlocks a lot more value. And you can see that even in the crypto space, right? I mean, we have companies that are working on and releasing products, say, on automated machine learning based trading, right? Or automated market making, related products. And so you have these sorts of factors as well that I think are very key, even directly, say, in the crypto world versus enterprise blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not just going down on the landscape. I have the landscape in my head. I can visualize it. So, you just said like technology intersections are very important. But then if we go down and just talk about that, where everything started, that the distributed ledger layer, the core distributed ledger technology layer, right? we've been seeing in the last few years, we've been seeing vendors and all sorts of organizations like innovating and focusing efforts on top of this layer, right? So in different areas outside of distributed ledgers. But how important is the distributed ledger, the core ledger layer for those companies that are, maybe, developing and launching an application on top of that? Is how important is that they pick the right ledger? Which one they should pick? What's the criteria there? Or should they, provide choice and, so the ledger is just pluggable? So how important is that layer today?
So this is an interesting part, right? So I think it is important on what ledger is selected. However, we're also seeing a rise in interoperability and bridges between blockchain. I think this is, I think it's still early, but we do anticipate significant developments on interoperability over the next, year to 2 years. And so I think it's important when you're looking at enterprise, and more important for creating value for whatever the purpose you're trying to create value is. So whether you're trying to create increased transparency for your end consumer because they know that your the piece of beef that they're buying was grass-fed versus grain-fed, or that it was a certain type of beef, or that proves that it's healthier, etc. Like, this is the type of information that the end consumer may value. They don't actually care necessarily what blockchain it is, and so sometimes you got to watch out, I think, with getting stuck on this, because in reality it's not entirely that difficult to change. And I think that's an important point. Having said that, on the enterprise blockchain side, I would say the specific blockchains that are being used are fairly limited, just because, only a handful of players are really focusing on enterprise development, sort of, in a way that sort of speaks to enterprise. On the public side, I think this is a much wider opportunity. You're seeing a lot more flexibility. There's always different blockchains on the public side that are more popular, but I think it's also important to note that this changes, right? I mean, every year, every 6 months, you're going to start seeing, one new player that sort of comes in and becomes more popular, and others that'll be less popular. And so, it's always important to sort of remember and look to those things, but it's not that hard to change if it comes to it.
Yeah. And do you think that, very similarly to how the cloud market has evolved, and especially while talking about the, B2B context, right, in the enterprise space, do you see as like a similar trend, like, companies are not, at the beginning they were not very comfortable with, public cloud, they were using private cloud, and then suddenly it got, got into hybrid, and there's a tendency to public. Can we say that in blockchain something similar might happen with, they are like companies getting comfortable with the permissioned sort of networks, and then inclining into hybrid, and then maybe at some point they will be using public networks, and so I don't know if is that something that might happen.
So this is an interesting one, right? Because I think that the great sort of debate in the blockchain space is always, is enterprise blockchain fully blockchain? Or are they going to move to sort of this public side of things? Now, I think that there's, in reality, a lot of challenges to this, right? I mean, if you've got, public companies, so traditionally public companies that, have the ability to track their supply chain and all of their suppliers essentially from a public blockchain, and all of their partners involved, would this create problems, challenges? Maybe yes, maybe no. You could argue that everyone's got the same information now, which in reality could be more fair. I think other people would argue that, it's maybe less fair because, it's getting ahead of things that are even getting reported, because now you can start to see their data before they're even reporting, certain things. And so in reality, I don't see major corporates trying to go public as a hard and fast rule. I think that they're going to stick with private blockchains that create transparency within a multi-party organization or multi-party sort of system. You could think of, someone like Walmart having 40 suppliers on there and having sort of transparency among them, but maybe not towards fully the public. And I think it's a similar way when you think about CBDCs or central bank digital currencies. You'll hopefully have more transparency between certain other parties for better auditability capabilities, et cetera. But that's still a closed group, and it's not necessarily going to be fully open to the public. If you talk about ideologies, I think some are, maybe would look at it differently, but that's probably more so the way that we would see it going. Having said that, there are cases where things are being experimented on public blockchains, right? I think, there's companies that have done public securities now on the Ethereum blockchain. So for example, Fatburger did an Ethereum-based security, right? And they raised $40 million. You're seeing others look at this and see whether or not it makes sense. You're seeing bonds that have sort of launched on Ethereum. So, there is experiments with these things, but I would, shy away from saying that that's really a trend as of now on making a lot of this, fully public from these organizations.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you, Ali. Now I'd like to ask change the topic a little bit and talk about the sort of the startups that or the projects that you as as a partner at Blockchain Founders Fund invest in. And I'm really curious about what are those key criteria and as well as your sort of due diligence process that you do before investing in any project or idea. I don't know if you can talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens is as we get recommendations on certain companies, or as companies apply and send us a note for funding, and we have a process as well where any company can sort of let us know what they're working on through our website, and we respond to 100% of companies and look at 100% of companies that submit stuff to us. So as that happens, it kicks off a process internally where one of our analysts will lead that sort of review. And they'll look at all sorts of things, from just trying to understand what are they working on, what is the industry, what is the opportunity, what is the problem they're solving, what is the solution. They'll try to understand what markets, what's the competitive landscape there. But in reality, we understand that because we're investing at a pretty early stage, so we're talking about typically looking at companies that are maybe don't have product market fit yet. Some of them do have product market fit, but very low revenues or no revenues yet, or even just 10 or 20K or so per month. And not all. Some are much more established when we invest in them. Have millions of page views and very popular tools. So it varies, but given sort of that degree of variance, we're also understanding that business models can change. Product market fit may not be figured out, but how can we identify what this could evolve to? Where are we seeing opportunities as well that we can talk to the founders about and see, are they open to it? And we're trying to assess different things, not if they're going to change what they're looking at, on a 30-minute call on a first interaction, but we're trying to understand even things like coachability and how are they thinking about their business? What are the assumptions that they're taking into consideration? And how are we breaking down those assumptions to make sure that they'll hold up or not, right? And so I think these are some key parts. I mean, there's literally been times where we didn't take a company in because we didn't see them as being coachable and agile in a way that we thought was important to navigate a lot of the challenges in the market. And there's been other cases where we've had companies building incredible technology that told us, hey, it's going to be another year before we go to market, or another year and a half. And we said, hey, well, when we break this down, this is not one product. This is 5 products, and actually 2 of your products are ready to go to market and 3 of them are not. And you could actually launch this next week, and we could go get customers and actually go get traction. And that'll also help the company a lot more if you think of it sort of in this way. And then, in that case, actually the founder agreed. He saw sort of what we were going for. And actually we did end up taking him in to our portfolio, and he actually did sort of follow, and we refined that a lot more, but he did actually go down that path because he saw it as a much better way to go to market and bring on customers. So it can vary a lot, just depending on how early or sort of how late the companies are, but we're typically focusing on companies sort of seed, pre-seed, and Series A, and so that gives you an idea of the types of companies or the stage of companies that we're coming on.
And how do you handle sort of idealism versus pragmatism? Meaning that are the decisions mostly ROI driven, or if there's a good social cause, does that matter to you in these situations?
So social cause definitely matters, and personally myself, as well as my partners and our team, I mean, we care a lot about driving impact, right? I mean, this is also why we work with organizations such as the United Nations. We do the work that we do within INSEAD as well. Having said that, we are ROI focused, and so if there's solutions that are pure impact driven and aren't driving an ROI, I mean, to us, that's not a sustainable business. That's probably a charity or a nonprofit, right? Which is, incredible things. That's not what we're focused on from a fund perspective. If they are building sustainable business models, we think that that's important. I mean, for truly transformative change, even on a social lens, it needs to have a business model that's going to fuel this and help make sure that the business is going to survive long term. And you can look at great examples of this. I mean, you can look at certain technologies, especially fintech, that's alleviated probably in a lot of cases more poverty, over the last 30 years than has ever been seen before on Earth, right? And a good example of that probably is WeChat and Alipay in China being part of a digital sort of revolution that's helped 900 million people sort of escape poverty. And this is where even solutions sometimes that people don't always think is social are actually driving massive change. Like I would say, in reality, something like DeFi has tremendous social potential. And some people might just look at that as a finance or a fintech sort of related product, but in reality, this can drive tremendous change and solve a lot of problems, especially that are UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. But you can break down a lot of these different solutions and how they actually are really helping people and help driving change across these industries.
Yeah. And as the Blockchain Founders Fund, you both invest, as you said, in early stage companies, but also advise them in terms of growth and strategy and so on. And especially for, all those startups that are really, really focused on blockchain, what do you see as, common challenges that they have right now? And what are those sort of key characteristics that make, some of them stand out more?
Yeah, this is a good one. I think this is sort of the holy grail for startups, right? I think there's a number of challenges that continue to come up, right? So always is strategy is one thing, is just figuring out like what's the direction we should go, why should we go, how do we pivot from customer feedback effectively, are we even getting customer feedback, do we have proper feedback loops? Like these are all very critical things to make sure they're built properly for a startup. And then, looking at other things like how do we go out and get, customers? So what do we have developed customer personas? Are they detailed enough? Do we know how to go after and have those conversations? What's our sales cycle look like? Where is it breaking down if there's problems along that sales cycle? So then that's sort of the next part to analyze. And then what I also find fascinating is sometimes you find really, really incredible businesses that then have a challenge on, sharing their story. And oftentimes this comes from when you have multiple more technical co-founders, but not always. But this is where they've got an incredible business, they're getting really good traction, and they can't actually share their story and vision and communicate it effectively, through their materials and through conversation. And this is something that oftentimes needs refinement to have people understand the journey and understand sort of how to go about, and sort of get involved in what they're doing. So you also see that as well quite a lot. So I would say that these are sort of the three areas. I mean, one interesting thing to sort of mention is, and I think most people would agree with me, now is probably the easiest time in human history to get capital. I mean, to get things funded, there's, more capital now than ever. But I think the real challenge is having those other areas, aligned and having clarity, and then being able to share that. And it's also easier now than ever before to access, investors. I mean, as I mentioned, you can send us a note on our website, and we're happy to look at every single thing that comes through. But I think it goes beyond capital and that sort of additional support, and really getting hands-on and helping our companies to drive, change and progress and drive those metrics, I think is very critical as part of how we look at success with our company.
And I see a question here, and I'm sure Ali, you can respond. I don't know if you see that as well. So what do the panel consider to be the driver of DLT adoption? It is the value proposition of the applications, or it is the requirement for the middleware layer to allow ease of development and deployment, agnostic of the blockchain provider, or both?
Yeah, so I mean, the way that I subscribe to things is always from a customer or a value perspective, right? I mean, I think one of the challenges right now is, still being able to show significant value that's being driven in contexts in the enterprise space and where things are getting piloted. And so, over the last few years, you've seen a lot of pilots start to happen, and then you started to see, real live use cases start to launch. But the thing is, these are some of those lead innovators. And so what's happening then is, that information starts going to their end consumer or to within sort of the parties. They're starting to see real value being driven. This then needs to impact and have a clear impact on increasing revenues or decreasing costs. Because if it's not, then how is it generating revenue, right? So if it's driving customer loyalty, it's probably driving up revenue, right? Or it's decreasing costs in some way, right? But you need to see like how are those things sort of coming into play, and then you'll start to see other competitors look at those solutions and say, okay, we need to actually copy that and figure out how to drive alpha. And I'll give you some quick examples, right? A lot of people aren't aware of, for example, what HSBC's been doing in the space. So they have their FX Everywhere platform. They've done 11.6 million trades on it. They've moved $1.2 trillion for FX settlements. And they've come out and said they have a 25% savings over the traditional FX process. And so it's hard to imagine how every other competitor that's a global bank is not going to follow that process. I mean, it's a 25% saving. It's a clear ROI decision, right? You can look at, the same thing when you look at food outbreaks, right? And you can already see what's happening in supply chain. But when you start to factor in the cost of food outbreaks, I think it becomes very clear how much money can be lost because of a lack of transparency within a system, right? And so an example of that would be, if you're watching this from Europe, you're familiar with the 2013 European horse meat scandal, and so you're aware of horse meat being advertised as beef in as many as 13 countries. Took Interpol 4 years, still making arrests in 2017 on trying to get to the bottom of the situation. So this, loses a lot of consumer confidence. You had products that were horse meat being sold in stores like Tesco and other major supermarkets. And so this is a problem, right? Same thing in the US, where Chipotle Mexican Grill had a problem that lost, eroded $9.8 billion of shareholder value. So this has a real cost, and this is where these problems can be sorted out much quicker, and that's driving a lot of value then.
Excellent. We have Johnny. We don't have more time.
Okay. I was going to say, if you can, one final thought from you each, and then if we can wrap up. Unfortunately, we're going to go to our next session, but I've been fully enthralled by this conversation that I lost track of time as well, so not your fault. But maybe, one last thought from each of you, and then if we can wrap up. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that we have to stop this conversation. I wanted to ask Ali about his work with the United Nations, that relates to DLT and but I don't know if you have any, last words for the audience.
Absolutely. If you're starting to look at this space, or even, if you've been in it for a long time, I mean, keep a close eye on what's going on in this space. I mean, from anything from NFTs and how that's going to change the world, it's still only the beginning. There's a lot of hype around these things, but I'm sure it'll die down, and then we'll see the real innovation continue over the next decade. But this is everything from a rights perspective that's digital. I think you're seeing the same thing on DeFi. I mentioned how it's going to change the world around underbanked and unbanked populations, and it's still not there yet. A lot of these things are still early, but keep a close eye on sort of what's going on in this space. And if you're a startup, I mean, keep building, reach out to me. There's many other, incredible, investors, supporters of early stage companies, I'm sure at this conference as well, and others, do reach out. We look forward to hearing from you and seeing how we can support you.
Yeah, thank you. And please take a look at the DLT landscape. It's dltlandscape.org, and let me know what you think. Thank you so much, Ali. I enjoyed this conversation a lot, and hope everybody did.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
It's been fascinating. Thank you so much. I first heard Ali on stage in GITEX in Dubai in December, and hence the invitation. He is a real thought leader and asset to the DLT blockchain space, and we look forward to continuing the relationship. Thank you very much, Ali, for joining us from Vancouver, Los Angeles.
Correct, Vancouver.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for fitting us in. What time of the day is it there, man?
It's now 5 a.m.
Oh my God! Wow.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
If not a problem.
People are doing it already, but if you can please show your appreciation, we have an emoji button at the bottom. If you could please show our appreciation for Ali. 5 o'clock in the morning. Wow. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your thoughts and insights. We really enjoyed that session. Csilla, thank you very much for facilitating it. You really well done. I think we got a lot from it. And look out for these guys in the DLT's landscape. And